Movies often specialize in creating dangerous situations that we might never encounter in real life, but since the actors and the crew have to actually survive these scenarios, the trick is to make them look dangerous while actually keeping everyone safe. Usually, this works out, but sometimes it goes very, very wrong. Today, we're taking a look at some of the most dangerous movie sets ever. In 2004, a star-studded, high-budget epic reimagining of the Battle of Troy began filming. While it seemed as though everything was in place for things to go smoothly, you know what they say about the best-laid plans. They often result in a pile of injuries and an underwhelming box office, right? The movie features a ton of giant battle scenes with hundreds of stuntmen and extras. In one moment of miscommunication from the stunt coordinator and director, a stuntman named George Camilleri jumped into a bustling crowd and badly injured his leg, which actually resulted in his passing 2 days later. In a less tragic but strangely coincidental turn of events, Brad Pitt, who was cast as Achilles, injured his Achilles tendon so badly that production shut down for 10 weeks. On top of that, the movie battled Hurricane Marty, a sizable robbery, and other misfortunes. While we might not regard Resident Evil: The Final Chapter as one of the better movies in the franchise, it was without a doubt the most dangerous. Specifically for the stunt people who put their lives on the line to bring the action to life and are so often totally overlooked when it comes to safety. Stunt woman Olivia Jackson's life changed completely after the filming of this movie, as she was involved in one of the most terrifying movie accidents of all time. During a motorcycle stunt, a camera rig got in the way of her path and she was severely injured. So much so that she had to be put into a medically induced coma and suffered injuries so severe that it's incredible that she survived at all. You'd think that would have shaken the production so much that they would have put measures in place to protect their stunt people properly, but only months later, a crew member named Ricardo Cornelius was crushed by a Humvee. The studio hid the accident altogether, and it only leaked after the movie was released. Trying to coordinate massive practical effects in movies is a dangerous job, and when it goes wrong, it can really go wrong. On the final day of shooting Twilight Zone, the movie, an accident that was so disastrous occurred that it actually resulted in lawsuits against the director and producers by the family members of those involved. During a scene in which the lead character, played by Vic Morrow, was supposed to be transporting 2 children to a helicopter during the Vietnam War, the combination of ill-timed pyrotechnics and a helicopter flying too low to the ground resulted in all 3 actors losing their lives and 6 crew members sustaining horrible injuries when the helicopter actually crash landed onto Morrow and the 2 children he was carrying. Director John Landis and the producers of the film were charged with involuntary manslaughter, coupled with the fact that they had violated child labor laws that were supposed to prohibit children from filming at night. They were all acquitted, but the accident has haunted the movie ever since. Werner Herzog has made some incredible movies in his day, and Fitzcarraldo is one of them. Unfortunately, anyone who has worked with the notoriously strange director on that film would have something different to say about it. In fact, they might be more inclined to punch Herzog in the face rather than say anything to him at all.
I live my life or I end my life with this project.
The ambitious movie is based off of true events, centered around a wealthy Irishman living in Peru who sets out to transport a steamship over a giant hill in order to access an area rich with rubber in the Amazon basin. Herzog actually forced his crew to manually haul the 320-ton ship over the steep hill, resulting in general misery and a ton of injuries. Not only that, but his leading man got so sick with dysentery after shooting 40% of the movie already that he had to leave, meaning that Herzog had to recast and then reshoot it all again.
If I abandoned this project, I would be a man without dreams.
Klaus Kinski, who took over, caused a ton of problems with his horrendous behavior and everyone despised him. So much so that one of the Peruvian members of the crew actually offered to do away with the actor, an offer which Herzog reluctantly declined. Sometimes a movie is so riddled with accidents that you have to wonder if it just really doesn't want to get made. At least it seems like that when it comes to movies like The Expendables 3. This high-octane, action-heavy franchise features a cast of slightly over-the-hill megastars, and the first 2 went off as well as could be, but when it came to the 3rd installment, behind every corner was another accident or injury. Sylvester Stallone, who was 68 at the time, fell on his back so hard that he actually required a metal plate to be inserted into his spine.
Don't worry about it, I'll handle it, Joe.
During his very first take, Antonio Banderas injured his knee and didn't say anything for the rest of the shoot because he didn't want to draw attention to his age.
Age?
It's just a state of mind.
Finally, there was the time when Jason Statham accidentally drove a truck into the Black Sea with himself strapped into the driver's seat. He made it out alive because apparently Jason Statham has been a legit action hero all along. You'd hope that, even if your movie is a total disaster to make, that it would all be worth it in the end when you wind up with something incredible. Well, in the case of Waterworld, that was, unfortunately, not the case. In fact, the 1995 post-apocalyptic water-based drama that's about a distant future in which rising seas have engulfed the Earth was pretty much in shambles from day one. To start, it was the most expensive movie that had ever been made at the time, with a budget of $127 million, but it made less than half of that back at the box office.
What?
And had a detrimental effect on Kevin Costner's career. Before it was released, however, the problems were endless. It turns out that shooting on the ocean is pretty hard, which was proven by the fact that a handful of people almost lost their lives. Along with the near drownings, there was seasickness, near constant jellyfish stings, and horrible weather to contend with. While some of the movies on this list wound up to be pretty big flops, this next entry was a whole other story. The African Queen was a huge success and remains a classic to this day, starring Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, and directed by old Hollywood legend John Huston. The shoot took place over 7 weeks and was spread out between locations in Uganda and the Congo. It's safe to say that these Hollywood greats were unprepared to shoot on location in Africa, and their production reflected that fact. Along with snakes, crocodiles, and dangerous mosquito bites, one unfortunate affliction struck the production hard. Very early on, the entire crew and Katharine Hepburn herself caught dysentery by drinking contaminated water and spent the entire duration of the shoot horribly ill.
Ain't a thing I can do about it.
The only two who remained unaffected were Bogart and Huston, who opted instead to drink only whiskey that had been imported in. We're not sure what's more disturbing, the fact that everyone got sick or that neither Huston or Bogart drank a sip of water in 7 weeks. In this era of enhanced CGI and lifelike animation, it's almost completely unnecessary to use real animals in place of animated ones. But that wasn't always the case, and it did not always go as planned. This is especially true in the case of the 1981 thriller Roar. While it wasn't billed as a thriller when they made it, that was only changed after it was revealed that 70 people involved in the making were severely injured by the pack of real, untamed lions that were featured in the movie. Everything about this movie is crazy. The fact that it was written and directed by Noel Marshall and stars his wife Tippi Hedren, the star of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, and their daughter Melanie Griffith. It was shot on their family home in California, where they already lived with a family of wild big cats. Injuries included, but are not limited to, broken limbs, gangrene from animal bites, a near scalping that took 200 stitches to fix, and almost losing an eye. The production was, unsurprisingly, a total disaster.
Well, if we stay here, we'll end up being eaten alive.
And ultimately wound up taking 11 years to produce altogether on a hugely inflated budget, which must have been made bigger by the many, many medical bills. The sinking of the Titanic was an accident so colossal and so scary that it was only a matter of time until someone made a movie about it, and in 1997, James Cameron did just that. The movie amazed and terrified audiences everywhere with its realism. Back in the day, we really felt like we were on that ship as it was going down into the freezing North Atlantic Ocean. The movie was such a huge success that it seemed like it had all been smooth sailing for everyone involved, but in reality, the set was an absolute nightmare to start with. Apparently, the film's massive $200 million budget couldn't afford a couple of hot water heaters, and so the water that the cast and crew were up to their necks in for weeks on end was actually freezing cold. Not Atlantic Ocean cold, but far from comfortable. Star Kate Winslet actually caught pneumonia during the filming and almost drowned during one particularly difficult scene. But nothing compares to the evening when, at the very end of the shoot, the entire crew, including director James Cameron, ate clam chowder that had just been laced with PCP. As people realized what had happened, crew members were rushed to the hospital and monitored overnight. All these years later, and still no one knows just who spiked the chowder.
Gentlemen, it has been a privilege playing with you tonight.
While it might not be the most well-known movie today, our top spot has got to go to the film that has caused the most outright fatalities among people who worked on it, and that honor goes to The Conqueror. Most of us know today about the dangers of radiation poisoning and how we want to stay pretty much as far away from radioactive areas as possible. Well, in 1956, they also knew this pretty obvious fact, but that didn't stop Howard Hughes and his team from setting up camp in the Utah desert, only 100 miles from the notorious nuclear testing zone, the Nevada test site. In the early 1950s, over 100 nuclear devices were tested right there. In 1953 alone, 11 atomic nuclear tests were carried out during Operation Upshot Knothole, creating mushroom clouds over tens of thousands of feet high, all carrying radioactive particles that were carried by the wind straight to the Utah desert. Only 3 years later, the crew of the Conqueror moved in and started filming. It was later discovered that the ground on which they were filming was covered in radioactive material, as 92 members of the 220-person crew later passed away from cancer, including the movie star John Wayne. While some believe that Wayne's illness was caused by the radiation, he personally blamed it on the fact that he smoked 6 packs of cigarettes a day, which is a fair point. Either way, the results of that shoot were truly tragic, only made worse by the fact that the movie is truly terrible. Recent studies have indicated that the area where they shot remained contaminated until 2007. Wow, we would not want to be on any of those movie sets. How about you? What do you think about these insane accidents and the movies that resulted from them? Did we miss any crazy stories that we have got to know about? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep up with all things ScreenRant.